This is Eat, Sleep, Box and Repeat, and I'm delighted to be joined by my Monday weekly preview co-host, I suppose, because it's always us now. Elliott Greg. Elliott, how are you?
Good, thanks, Paul. Good, thank you. As we were saying, weren't we? It was a very busy weekend last week for boxing. For those of us who were unfortunate enough to watch most of it, and I think you've got, we had obviously Edwards on the Friday, the zone card on Saturday, and then obviously what happened last night. It's just it's one of those things you think about last night. You talk about Mayweather and the other sort of stuff that was going on. Which I watched a bit of. So I'm feeling almost boxed out to a degree, but I'm excited actually to talk to you about some of the I suppose serious fights that are going ahead this week. We can preview those, take everyone through it. So yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. Thank you very much for asking. How are you getting on?
Yeah, all good. Thanks, all good. As you said there, we film this on a Monday. I know it doesn't get released until later in the week, but it was funny. Just it was stacked weekend of boxing. Really, you obviously had Nick Ball, and then the BT show on Friday night, Sonny Edwards as well on the Probellum show. Saturday you had your Sky show, your DAZN show, whatever, and then last night the I'm not going to call it the DAZN show or the BT show. Might call it the shit. Might call it the shit show. So yeah, obviously it was last night. Tommy Fury, and then obviously you being Jake Paul's number one fan. I'm sure you were loving all those clips.
I'm a big Jake Paul fan. I was tuning in for that. I think, to be honest with you, to me that just looks like boxing's at WWE now, mate. When John Fury's gone shirtless and he's hanging over the rope, it's just like, what world have we sort of passed into now? We're no longer serious. We're not taking anything seriously. But those guys obviously making a lot of money. They're obviously doing what they're doing. Fair play to them. But it is ridiculous. But yeah, I'm excited to sort of get off that train. Not the Jake Paul train, because I'm always on that. But I'm excited to get off maybe the kind of events of last night and move on to something a bit more serious for us boxing fans.
Yeah, for sure, you're right. And yeah, without further ado, I suppose we'll get stuck into this weekend's boxing. So yeah, we're going to preview three fights. It's a lot quieter this weekend than it is last weekend. I think that was fair to say. But my favorite fighter in the world's fighting this weekend, and we'll start with him. Jaime Munguía fighting Gonzalo Gaston Corla, I think you pronounce his name. And yeah, just a quick overview of the fight. It's in Guadalajara in Mexico. Munguía is not his hometown, but obviously he's a Mexican fighter himself. Munguía is 40-0 with 32 knockouts. Gaston Corla is 21-5 with 8 knockouts. 25 years old is Corla, and Munguía is 26. The opponent for Munguía is a southpaw. He's an inch smaller than Munguía, but yeah, he's won his last 3 fights, I suppose you could say, has Gaston Corla. But you're looking at this, Jaime Munguía. I know, obviously, I joked at the start saying he's my favorite fighter because he really does frustrate the living daylights out of me. But he's 40-0. He has got some good wins. We have seen him in a few good fights. But I'm going to throw it back to you here, Elliot, in a second. Just a couple of questions. He's 40-0, and you could name, not even on one hand, if you cut half your hand off, you could still name his amount of good opponents on your one hand. Let's be honest, his 40-0 record with 32 stoppages. Yeah, fair play to him. He's done what he's had to do, but especially recently as well, since the Liam Smith fight and bar maybe Rosado, it's such a poor record with fighters that don't really have any right of being in the ring with Munguía. So it's just frustrating for me. But at the end of the day, he's a big name. He's one of the top-ranked middleweights in the world. So yeah, what do you think of this fight? What do you think of this fight, Elliot? And do you give Gaston Corla any chance of beating Munguía?
I think. Well, first of all, thank you, Paul, for taking us through that, because I know how torturous that was for you, and you were almost getting lower and lower in your seat as you were having to take us through it. But I think I fully agree with you, to be honest. And I know we've spoken in a team, you and I have spoken, but also in the team as well. We've kind of spoken a bit about Munguía, and it's been like, how is this happening? So essentially, how are you able to basically tie up a belt like this? Essentially, or even just kind of fight no one. Like, you're 26 now, like you said, you've got to almost, I suppose, like we saw a bit with Ramirez last week. Gilbert Ramirez, you got that 44-0 record, whatever, but you haven't actually fought anyone. And you're looking again at like Munguia's record, and like there's a few names you kind of recognise, obviously like Spike Sullivan, Rosado, like you mentioned, that Cesar Meta or whatever. Like, you only know him as an opponent for, don't you, for the Triple G you fought, wasn't it? I think
Yeah.
that guy's well. You're sitting there going kind of like, okay, like for someone who's had so many fights, you should probably be fighting people that are better than this. So I fully agree with you, and I feel like it's one of those things where you're going to have like Chavez's kind of record, but no one's going to know hardly anyone you fought. And I looked at the guy he was fighting, and I thought, okay, like he's Argentinian, whatever, like you say, but he's lost 5 times, been KO'd once, and he's fought pretty much. Well, majority of his fights have been with the occasional like. He occasionally travelled to say US or to like Riga. I looked at that, mostly in Argentina, mostly sort of like 10 rounders, some 8 rounders, some 6 rounders. And you're sitting there going, what the fuck is this? Frankly, like what is this though? Like really, like what is this? So no, like I think, to be honest with you, I think we've got to touch on it, I suppose, obviously for the profile of Munguía. But really, it's another one of those, isn't it? It's another one of those where you look at it and go, well, what are we expecting? I mean, we're expecting 32 KOs for 40, probably expecting another KO, probably go 41, 33 KOs, probably. Kind of how I'm looking at it. Quite easily see that. Either way, don't know much about the opponent. He's been stopped once. Could be a UD, but I'm thinking Munguía KO. But I'm also like you. I'm thinking, come on, me, fight someone better than this. Like like genuinely just fight someone better than this. And we saw like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I didn't give. I think it's a fair thing to say is I didn't possibly give Denzel Bentley the credit pre-fight that he deserves for going over at the weekend and going 12 rounds. But you could kind of look at what even someone like that can do, like take the opportunity. And you go, okay, Munguía is maybe not the best middleweight in the world, but at some point you've got to step up and fight someone. Otherwise, you're looking at it and just going, your career is pointless from a fan perspective. And from I suppose, a kind of peer perspective. I mean, I'll put it back to you, actually, because we've talked about this off air slightly, but I was going to kind of see whether you have any thoughts on this. And it's a sense that we're going, I don't personally understand how he kind of gets these opportunities, or how he kind of gets the pass that he seems to get. Like, it's not as if you're sitting like filling out stadiums, we're going, you have like some easy opponents, you're filling out stadiums, whatever. It's like almost like your profile's not really going anywhere. You don't really appear to be going anywhere yourself, but you're just picking up these victories, so people kind of have to say, oh yeah, 42-0, whatever, like 43-0, but it's kind of meaningless. So what I'd put back to you, really, I suppose, is like, why do you think he's been allowed to get away with this? Essentially,
I know. Yeah, I know. That is the $1 million question, isn't it? I think. Well, the one thing we will say, I know you touched on it there. Yes, he still is young. He's only 26, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt in that sense. But if you've had 40 fights by the time you're 26, it's kind of like Canelo-esque, really, isn't it? But look, if you looked at Canelo at that time, who he was fighting in his 40th fight, far better opponents than Jaime Munguía is fighting. It's just frustrating. Don't get me wrong. There's no doubt he's a good fighter and he's world class. But he needs to fight someone. He needs that name, especially now that he's up at middleweight. He needs to fight. Like I've written down a few names here. Obviously, you've got your obvious ones like your Golovkin, if he's still hanging about. Andrade, if he's not stepping up to super middle. Eubank Jr. Smith winner. It looks like they're going to fight in December. Why not do that again? I know Liam Smith wants that rematch and whatever, but I mean, I don't know if that'll happen. But even people like Carlos Adames, Erislandy Lara, not gatekeepers, that's not a fair word to say, above, just below the world title level, just fringe world title level, good enough to challenge for the title. But Munguía doesn't really have very many names like that in his resume. Even, your Murata, obviously we saw last weekend, I'm just going to call him Zanabek. That's he KO'd this opponent in 2 rounds. So I think Munguía will need to look at this and think, okay, well, if Zanabek can do that in 2 rounds, I wonder, I'll try and do it in 1 or whatever. I think he will end up knocking him out in the first half of the fight. Don't know if he'll beat Zanabek within 2, but, in the future, Zanabek against Munguía is a big fight. There's so many big fights in that division, even Felix Cash. We saw Denzel Bentley getting a world title shot. Felix Cash beat Bentley in a few rounds and did it more handily than Zanabek did. He could be on the track for a world title shot at middleweight soon. So I just want him to fight a live opponent, really, to be honest.
No, I actually agree with you. I think out of those names, there's nothing I disagree with there, frankly. Absolutely nothing I disagree with. And I think like when you started mentioning those names, I was also sitting there thinking, I'd probably pick most of them to beat Munguía, probably with the exception potentially of Cash, just because he's obviously unproven at that level. But the other guys like Triple G, back Triple G to beat him. So I think it's just a case of getting it on. And like you made the very good point there with Canelo's record, and Canelo at that age as well. And obviously the people that he'd fought. And I know obviously Canelo was throwing in guys like Matthew Hatton, I suppose, and like even to like the Fieldings and those sort of people. But fundamentally, like Munguia's got no one of that level on his name, or no one that anyone's heard of to this audience, or even really, I suppose, to an American audience, really. So yeah, I think we could even be talking about this fight longer than the fight might even happen. But yeah, I think Munguia victory. Hopefully, fights someone decent is in summary, and then yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. But for regards to this actual fight, just another one of those kind of Munguia anonymous events in some ways.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like we could talk about Munguia and rant about him for another half an hour, but we don't want to do that. So I'll throw it over to you, Elliot, for our second fight, which I believe you're going to take us through, one that's taking place on British shores.
Yeah, that's correct. So I'm actually going to let people a bit behind the editorial curtain here and say that you suggested essentially the fights we're going to talk about today. And when I saw this one, I was like, I obviously know a bit about Liam Davies, but and it didn't necessarily stand out to me until I actually started researching it a bit. And I thought, hold on a second, this is actually a live fight, a lot liver than I thought it was going to be. So yeah, so giving obviously away one of the protagonists here. So we've got Liam Davies against Elliott Baluta, I believe is how you pronounce it. But anyway, this is taking place at the Telford International Centre on Saturday night. So this is a European title fight, European Super Bantamweight, WBC International Super Bantamweight fight across 12 rounds. Now, looking at both guys' records, so Liam Davies is undefeated, orthodox fighter, 26 years of age, 12 wins, 5 KOs. Baluta 28, so yeah, slightly older, but obviously not old enough that you'd say he was on the decline. 15 victories, 3 losses, never been stopped, but with 3 KOs to his name. Now, some people may recognise the Baluta name as it's been around actually with some credible opposition. So he lost a majority decision against Conlon. This was back in 2021. Beat Brad Foster on points. Beat TJ Doheny on points as well. So there's 3 guys really there that you would recognise if you're, I suppose, slightly beyond casual level, possibly in your boxing fandom. Liam Davies, I think his best win, I don't know if you'd agree with me here, Paul, would probably be Mark Leach last time out, which was a UD victory there across 12 rounds. Now, yeah, so initially when I saw this fight, I just thought, Liam Davies, hometown fight, probably win 12 rounds, like expecting him to I think that's the expectation there. But looking at the opponents that Baluta's had as well, and the results he's had against those opponents, I'm now of a completely different opinion. So, Paul, the thing for me here, though, I'm going to be fair in saying this, I think, is because it's in Davis's hometown, and with Baluta's KO percentage being low, like 3 and 15, my concern is it going to be a hometown decision? So, Paul, you're our betting expert, frankly. And again, we say this every Monday. Paul, I've reached into my pocket, dusted off the cobwebs from this shiny coin. I'm going to metaphorically pass you through the ether and say knowing those facts, knowing the location, knowing the records, knowing that some of those opponents you mentioned there, how are you seeing this? This is actually a difficult one for me to kind of come out and say either way how I see it going, given the location, given the kind of CV of Baluta. So yeah, which way do you see this going, please? If you give us your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that was a brilliant summary, and I couldn't agree more. Honestly, the more you look at this fight, you just think, oh, this is actually a bit of a cracker. This is a really, really good fight. Obviously, Davis did have that win over Mark Leach, and it's a very good win. Mark Leach had a few great performances leading up to then, and Liam Davies, I don't know whether he was the underdog, but I know it would have been close in the odds, and he put on a great performance against Mark Leach. I think it's fair to say that this probably is another step up. I know it's for the European Super Bantamweight belt, but yeah, as you mentioned with Baluta, beat TJ Doheny, who was a former world champion, went 12 with Conlon and got, and one of the cards was a draw. And if you look at Conlon, the amateur pedigree, obviously was outboxing Lee Wood pretty handily until he got stopped. So that's I know he didn't win, but even taking 4 rounds off 4 or 5 rounds off Conlon, it's a feat in itself. And then last time out he won against Brad Foster, which is again, a brilliant win. And you said there about giving me this metaphoric coin to put on one of the fighters. And if you look at it, you mentioned there the interesting thing about it being in Davis's hometown. If you look at his last fight, Baluta against Brad Foster, I'm not sure if it was in Brad Foster's hometown, but it was in the UK. And he got, it was still very, if you look at it, it was very wide on the cards. So he was clearly he was probably clearly fair scoring. Will that happen in his hometown? I'm not so sure. But see, if this is another one, I haven't looked at any betting odds for this, so I'll kind of sit in the fence until Wednesday, until me and Stoddy do the betting show. But I'd like to see the odds first to see who's the favourite here, because I could imagine Liam Davis would be the favourite with the bookmakers just because of where it is and the fact he's undefeated and he's more well known. But if Baluta was a big enough underdog, I'd definitely put money on him. I would definitely put money on him. Just quickly before we finish, I'd like to mention the I know BoxRec rankings aren't the official world rankings, but Baluta's inside the top 10 in the world at super bantam according to BoxRec, whereas Liam Davis is down at 23. So if you're looking at this on paper, if we're not looking at it from UK kind of tinted glasses, I suppose, if you're looking at this fight from, I don't know, America, and you're looking at this, you're going to be like, oh yeah, Baluta, yeah, he'll win. He's got the better resume, and he does. You have to kind of agree with that. So it actually is a really fun fight, and I'm looking forward to it.
No, I totally agree with you. Actually, I think you make some very valuable. Will be a valuable tip there, which is to possibly back Baluta when the odds come out. Because I actually, from anything else other than the kind of location British judging kind of aspect of this, I'm going. Of course, Baluta's probably going to win this on points. Should win it on points, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I think we're gonna. It's our agreement, isn't it, Paul? That we're now gonna. And I defer to you here on betting things and also on editorial direction. We're going to talk about a fight that's on the undercard of this, or taking place in the same location, aren't we? Here,
yes.
Next up. So I don't know if you want to introduce that for fans. Then we'll have a little quick check in on that one as well.
Yeah, just really quickly. We'll not go in too much detail because I think it's a one-sided fight. Let's be honest. But for the first time in 2022, I know it's near the end of the year, but we're getting to see Anthony Yarde back in the ring. Hasn't fought since December last year, I believe it was, in his 4th round stoppage win against Lyndon Arthur, and he is fighting. Is it Stefani Koikov or Koibov? I think it's Koikov, and he's 14-1. So on paper, got a good resume. But if you actually go into his name and look at the fighters he's beaten, it is the most padded record you've ever seen. So yeah, 14-1. It's one of those where when on the BT pundits be like, oh, Anthony Yarde in a tough test next against a man who's only lost once. It sounds good it sounds good, but when you go and look at it, like it's so one-sided, it's unbelievable. But I understand Yarde hasn't fought for the best part of a year, so fair enough. He just wants to get a bit of ring rust off probably, and then fight for a world title next year. So yeah, not really going too much into this fight, I suppose, Elliot. But I just kind of want to ask you, well, do you see this the same as me, as a straightforward Yarde victory within a few rounds? And then my second question would be, 2023, is that the year we see Anthony Yarde win a world title?
It's great questions, a couple of great questions, and thank you for a very enlightening and succinct summary there, because it also aligns with a lot of things I was thinking. You're looking at it, you're going, it is nice to see Anthony Yarde back, frankly. And even though it's not necessarily in the fight that we'd want to see, given the stacked division that you've got at light heavy at the moment, globally and domestically. But equally, I think it's nice to see him back. Do I see it being one-sided? Yes. Do I see it being first half the fight type of thing? Well, it depends kind of how Yarde wants to play it. I kind of feel if he wants to stop him going and blast him out, yeah. But I don't know whether the thinking for him will be try and get a few rounds in. Like you say, hasn't boxed since he fought Lyndon Arthur. Obviously had a tough year last year, personal problems, and he had obviously a lot of bereavement in his family and stuff as well. So kind of see how he kind of wants to play it. But I think with regards to next year, so it's one of those divisions, isn't it? It's so I just don't know. Obviously, you've got what's happening with Bivol, you've got what's happening with Bitabayev. Those guys obviously want to fight each other, allegedly want to fight each other. You've got Canelo sniffing around. Does he want the Bivol rematch? You've got Bout in there. You've got Callum Smith. All these guys that you kind of or essentially, deserving, or at least up there, the upper echelons. I feel like these guys need to sort of fight each other maybe a little bit, and then just get one of them to sort of stand out, whether that's Smith, whether that's Boatsi, whether that's Yarde. Yard sort of fighting each other and then going to step up to maybe fight someone like Bivol or Vitabayev would be my desire. So in a way, I could excuse the champions in that division for not fighting any of those guys next year if they sort of fight each other. Or if they say they fight each other and then the winner fights Canelo or whatever, or however that sort of comes out, I can kind of see that as being acceptable, or more than acceptable. And then the other guy leaps up and contests. But I feel Anthony Yarde's one of those guys that we've seen him, obviously, haven't we? Like, he's had obviously the world title shot. We saw what happened with Kovalev, obviously saw what happened even with Lyndon Arthur, personal issues aside. I feel like with him and Boatsi and even Smith, for all three of them have a similar sort of problem in my mind, where it's like they need to like go up further. They need an opponent that can sort of put them on that world championship level to fight a sort of a Bivol or a Vitabayev. I think Smith has shown obviously a lot of talent in division, blasting people out. Needs a sort of proving fight. Boatsi still potential, isn't he? Like, we're sitting there going, every single time we speak about him, we're like, oh yeah, potential, great potential. Should be world champion one day. Needs to fight someone that you can sit there and go, oh right, yeah. The Richards fight was all right, but you're still like, come on, mate, let's get going. And I feel the same for Anthony Yarde as well. I feel like he needs another one of those. So I feel like if those guys were to fight each other, or like in a little, or however, or at least two of them were to fight each other, I would choose the one then to step up and have a world title shot. Sorry, that's probably a longer answer than we were expecting, but that's kind of how I see that division. Yourself, I mean, how are you seeing it? Are you seeing, out of those three guys, I know that you hold a special sort of affection for one of them, but I was wondering how do you see the next year shaping out for those three, really, and which one do you think is most deserving of a world title shot?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with everything you said there. They all do, Smith, Boatsi and Yarde, they all do need, a kind of another standout winner. I know Smith got a good knockout last time. It was against Borderley or something you call him. And it ended up being he was actually better than a lot of people thought. And it was a good stoppage in the end. But I think if you're looking at the last three performances, you're probably saying that Yarde's was the best, because he'd been beaten by Lyndon Arthur, and then in the rematch he kind of broke him down in 4 rounds and looked a lot better. Of the three, who do I see winning? I think Callum Smith, personally. It sounds stupid because of, he was down at super middle, but he's still the biggest light heavy out of the three as well. He's a big guy, and I'd like to see one of the three of them fight someone like Joe Smith Jr., for example, who's just won the world title, then got beat by Beterbiev, but it was a close fight. He's still up there in the top 5, definitely in the top 10. So, if Yarde or Smith or Boatsi want to fight for a world title, maybe a final eliminator against someone like Joe Smith, even Gilberto Ramirez, I know he might want a few rebuilding fights, but he's just coming off the loss to Bivol. You never know, fights like that next year to get them right up to the top, in the top 10, and then world title shots, depending on what Bivol and Beterbiev do, and potentially Canelo. So yeah, I'm excited to see him.
Like big guys as well. I feel like someone like Smith would just go in and starch him. And if you start like going and do that with someone who's like 44 and 44-1, you're sitting there going, yeah, in you go then. He's like third, fourth in like the ring rankings in that division, whatever. So you've gone in there and knocked him out. Crack on. Let's see you fight one of the champions. I feel like Ramirez is actually a good gateway for someone like Callum Smith to prove that. And like you say, Joe Smith Jr. as well. I think style wise and physical stature wise would actually be a great fight for someone like Anthony Yarde, to be honest. Or Boatsi. So I think that's a really good recommendation for matchmaker Paul. But I'm going to come back to you, Paul, now to give us the last summary, the last fight I believe we're touching on this week. And I don't want to ruin it for fans before you get a chance to do that. So Paul, please take it away. Yeah,
thanks, Elliott. Well, I'm conscious of time, so we'll whiz through this one, because it's fair to say that neither of these, it's not a big name, neither big names as such, but at the same time, it's a big enough fight. It's for the European super welterweight title, and it's Milan Prat against Abbas Barao. And again, a lot of people won't have heard of either of those two men, but just kind of give you a quick summary. Prat's 17-0 with 14 stoppages. He's only 23 years old. Clearly a bit of hype behind him in France, which is where this fight is as well. So it's in his home country. Then you've got Barao, who's 12-1 with 8 stoppages. So both big punchers, both roughly 70% or higher knockout percentages here. Barrow's 2 inches smaller than Pratt, both orthodox. Barrow obviously does have one loss on his resume, but his resume is better than Milan Pratt's. I don't want us to go too far into this because I say it's not, neither are huge names. They could be in the future, but as of yet, they're not big names. So really, is it the fact that is this because it's in France? Will this favor Milan Pratt? Elliott, will it favor him? It is a good fight. As I said, a lot of fans won't know about it, but quickly, will it favor Pratt being in France? Who do you think will win? Because interestingly, again, like the Baluta Davies one, if you actually look at the BoxRec rankings, Barrow's 18th and Pratt's back in 81st. So again, I like you think Pratt would be the favourite here because it's in his hometown. But if you actually look at it in rankings, he's nowhere near Barrow. So yeah, just if you can give me a 30-second, 60-second summary of how you see this fight going.
I agree with you fully. Again, I think like there's some serious betting value here actually. If you want to go for the Baluta and and then bet on this fight as well for the away fighter victory, I think could actually have some serious value to it. I think one of the things that I was thinking when you were discussing through it is obviously talking about the KO percentages of both guys, and you're looking at that going, well, actually, hold on, like this might not go to the judges. So in a way, that would favour Barrow. I think in that sense. Again, though, don't know a lot about both guys, but again, looking through BoxRec, there's certain guys that you do recognise from his sort of record. John O'Donnell was the one. Carlos Molina was another that kind of stood out for me that I had heard of. But yeah, so sitting there kind of going, okay, better CV, like you said. I actually am going to be tempted here to go with Burrell and just go, right, let's just double up on a Baluta Burrell B&B double and let's see where we go. Frankly, like take my coins down to Mr. Ladbrokes, Mr. Betfred, Mr. Paddy Power, other bookies are available, and just see what I can get, because I reckon, like you say, like the home fighter advantage will have money going in on that one. But if it's not going to go the distance in this case, then yeah, you're hoping that you're hoping against everything that the UK judges in a close fight will be prepared to give it to an away fighter. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm seeing it. I don't know if that's 6 seconds or less, but does that agree with? Do you chime in and agree with that, Paul, or do you disagree with what I'm saying?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if you were giving me, if I had to stick money on one of these two fighters, I'd put it on Barral. And I could see him being the underdog. So who knows? Well, as I said, I'll do the betting show on Wednesday with Stoddy. But hopefully by then, when the odds have been released, I'm hoping those two are an underdog, and that could be my double for the weekender. So yeah, once again, Elliott, that's all we've got time for today. Thanks once again for previewing this week's action. If you want to check out all the rest of our content, there'll be betting shows on there, interviews with fighters, lots of that. Look at sometimes we'll do some reviews as well. Some different stuff. We're going to be a lot of different content coming out, discussions about different divisions in general, how we see them playing out. And obviously, because it's coming into 2023, like last year, I assume we'll as well be doing, our predictions for the upcoming 12 months and stuff. So yeah, check all that out on our YouTube channel. Elliott, thanks very much and all the best. See you again soon.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks for facilitating, and thank you guys at home for watching.